All right, so for this deep dive, you guys have given us quite the challenge, huh? I mean, this is a whole stack of stuff about the South African film and TV industry. And, well, it seems like things are a bit messy, to say the least.
Yeah, messy might be putting it lightly. Looking through all of this, it's clear that the industry is facing some pretty serious issues, and that's despite, all its potential.
Oh, yeah, there's definitely potential there, and I'm really curious to dig into that. We've got news articles, opinion pieces, blog posts, even social media commentary, you name it. This really does run the gamut, and some of it, frankly, is pretty shocking. Like, we saw an article about actors having to sell their equipment just to pay rent because they haven't been paid for their work. What's going on there?
Well, that right there, that's a prime example of just how much this crisis is affecting real people. It really hits home the human cost of it all. But before we jump into all the drama and turmoil, maybe we should start by talking about the industry's potential.
Right, because it wasn't always like this, was it? It wasn't always this kind of doom and gloom situation.
Definitely not. I mean, the South African film industry, it used to be this beacon of hope, a real powerhouse for economic growth, a place to create jobs, to attract international investment. Before COVID hit, they had something like 60,000 workers and they were pulling in billions of rands. It was even a big part of the National Development Plan 2030.
So what went wrong? How did we go from all that promise to, well, this?
Well, that's what we're here to figure out. This whole crisis, it's kind of exposed these cracks in the system, the things that weren't working, thousands of jobs gone, people's livelihoods just shattered, and families struggling to make ends meet, all because they're not getting paid.
And it's not just any companies either. A lot of the ones hit hardest are black-owned,
Right.
right? So it's not just economics we're talking about here. It's social equity, too.
Exactly. And one name that keeps popping up over and over in all this is the DTIC. That's the Department of Trade, Industry, and Competition. They're a huge player in this whole story.
Okay, but what exactly does the DTIC have to do with making movies and TV? I'm not really seeing the connection here.
Well, they're the ones in charge of the production rebate. That's a program, a financial incentive that helps a lot of local productions, especially independent ones, to actually get off the ground. Basically, it gives them back some of the money they spend on making the film here in South Africa.
So the DTIC basically controls the purse strings, deciding which projects get funded. How does that actually work in practice, and how is it affecting filmmakers?
Well, that's where things get a little dicey. A lot of the sources are pointing fingers at the DTIC, saying their inefficiency is one of the main reasons this whole thing is falling apart.
Inefficiency how? Give us the details.
Oh, we're talking massive delays in approvals for these rebates. They're taking forever to make payments, and it's leaving these productions in limbo. The filmmakers totally strapped for cash. I mean, the backlog of claims goes back years, like 2, even 3 years. Right now, they're working on claims from 2023. Can you imagine? Filmmakers finished their projects years ago, and they're still waiting on this money they're owed.
Oh, wow. That's a long time to be waiting, especially when you've got bills to pay. I bet that puts a lot of financial strain on these productions, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Many of these filmmakers, they have to take out loans just to cover their expenses, and they end up racking up a ton of interest while they're waiting for that rebate money. For the smaller companies, the independent ones, it can be devastating. Pushes them to the brink.
I can totally see why people are protesting outside the DTIC offices.
Yeah.
What exactly are they demanding, though? What needs to change?
Well, from what I've read, they delivered this memorandum basically demanding action. They want a full investigation into how the DTIC is handling this whole program, the rebates, the backlog, everything. And they want a plan, a real plan to fix it. Oh, and they also want the adjudication committee to start meeting again.
The Adjudication Committee. Who are they and what happened to them?
They're the ones who actually review these rebate applications. The problem is they haven't met in over a year. So basically, filmmakers send in their applications, do everything by the book, and then nothing. It's got to be so frustrating.
I can only imagine. Years of waiting, bills piling up, and not even a word from the very people who are supposed to be supporting them. It really does make you question the DTIC. Like, how competent are they really? How committed are they to helping this industry?
Exactly. And to make things even worse, they launched these new guidelines in 2023, but they're only making things more confusing.
So now you've got filmmakers struggling to understand these new rules, not getting any answers from the DTIC, and waiting years for these crucial payments. It sounds like a recipe for disaster.
You said it, and it makes you think, doesn't it? Are these issues with the DTIC just the tip of the iceberg? Is this a symptom of something bigger, something wrong with how the government supports creative industries? And what happens if this all goes unchecked? It's not just money we're talking about here. It's creativity, it's jobs, it's the ability for South Africa to tell its stories to the world.
That's a really good point. And speaking of stories, our sources reveal a whole other mess brewing within the industry itself. We're talking about allegations of misconduct, malpractice, and some of these names are pretty big, people who've worked on some very well-known shows.
Yeah, this is where things get even more complicated. We're starting to see a pattern here, a pattern of behavior that just doesn't sit right.
Well, let's unpack all of that, but maybe after quick breaks we can really get into it.
It seems like a lot of it boils down to, well, non-payment and mistreatment of staff. And sometimes it really gets out of hand.
I mean, it's one thing to have to wait for a payment, but what are we actually talking about here? How bad does it get?
Think about it. People losing their homes, having their cars repossessed, like complete financial ruin, all because they didn't get paid for the work they did.
That's awful. It's got to be so stressful, so disheartening. You work hard, and then you're left with nothing because someone else messed up.
Yeah, and it's not just a couple of isolated incidents either. We're seeing this kind of thing pop up again and again in these sources. One name that comes up a lot is Japtha Molobane, a producer with a bit of a reputation, let's say, for not paying people.
He's connected to a bunch of different production
Right.
companies, right? What's the deal there?
Well, one of the articles claims his company, Samamo Productions, has this long history of not paying their staff. We're talking months and months of no paychecks. And the crazy thing is, despite all this, he keeps getting work.
Wait, hold on. If there's all this proof that he's not paying people, how is he still allowed to operate? How's he getting these contracts?
That's what a lot of people are asking. Some even suggest that he has, let's say, a close relationship with certain executives at MultiChoice. It makes you wonder if there's some favoritism going on, maybe some strings being pulled behind the scenes.
MultiChoice, the DSTV and Showmax people. They're a pretty big name. What are they saying about all this?
I haven't seen anything that directly implicates them in any wrongdoing, but they're a major force in this industry, right? So it's definitely worth looking at their role. I mean, they're the ones commissioning these productions, so how much responsibility do they have to make sure everyone is playing by the rules?
Yeah, they can't just pretend they don't know what's happening, especially if it's happening on their watch.
Right. But let's shift gears for a second because there's this other case, and it's pretty wild. It has to do with a show called Widows Unveiled that aired on Showmax, MultiChoice's streaming service. It's about intellectual property theft.
Hold on. Widows Unveiled. What happened there? This sounds juicy.
Okay, so these two producers, Stan Machunu and Refilwe Mutavu, they claim they pitched this idea, a very similar concept, to Mzansi Magic, the MultiChoice channel, back in 2021.
And they got rejected.
Yep. But fast forward 3 years, and boom, this show pops up on Showmax. Same concept, same kind of cast, same storyline, but produced by a totally different company, Passion Lane Productions.
And the original creators, they had nothing to do with it.
According to them, absolutely nothing. They're saying their idea was straight up stolen. So now everyone's talking about how intellectual property is protected or not protected in the industry.
This is getting more and more complex, isn't it?
Yeah.
Non-payment, people being treated poorly, these potential conflicts of interest, and now this. It's a lot to process.
It really is. And this case with Widows Unveiled, it really shows you the kind of power dynamics we're dealing with. You have all these talented people, often freelancers, putting their heart and soul into their work, and then they get taken advantage of by the people at the top.
It makes you wonder, what protections are there for these creators? Are there any systems in place to stop this kind of thing from happening, especially when you're dealing with a company as big as MultiChoice?
You're hitting on a crucial point. And this isn't just a South African problem. It's happening all over the world, these power imbalances, these ethical gray areas. It's a wake-up call for the industry. They need strong organizations, clear regulations, and a culture where people are held accountable. That's the only way to protect the people doing the work and the creative ideas they bring to the table.
Well, since we're talking about MultiChoice, maybe we should really dig into their role in all of this.
Yeah.
They are the biggest player in the game, so what they do or don't do has a huge impact on everyone else.
Oh, for sure. MultiChoice, with DSTV and Showmax, they pretty much dominate the entertainment scene here. Every decision they make sends ripples throughout the whole industry.
So what have they said about all these problems? Are they even acknowledging them?
Well, from what I've seen, they've put out statements saying they're aware of the concerns and that they're committed to finding solutions. They've been emphasizing this rule that all the production companies they work with have to follow industry standards. That means treating everyone fairly, paying their staff on time, all that.
Okay, that sounds like a good first step. But is it enough? What are they actually doing to change things?
They say they're being more careful about which production companies they work with, and they're trying to put systems in place so this doesn't keep happening. They're also saying they're working directly with the companies to try to get those late payments sorted out.
That's good, I guess. But
Mm.
some people are saying multi-choice needs to be more proactive. Like they can't just talk about it. They need to actually do something. Maybe investigate the allegations, withhold payments until they know everything's above board, maybe even stop working with certain companies altogether. What do you think about that?
I think it's a valid point. It really comes down to how much responsibility does a company like MultiChoice have for the actions of the companies they hire? Can they just set some rules and wash their hands of it? Or do they need to be more involved, more hands-on to make sure everyone is being treated fairly?
That's a tough question. It's something we're seeing a lot these days, this demand for companies to be responsible, to make sure everyone they work with is ethical.
It's not enough to just turn a blind eye anymore. People care about where their entertainment comes from, how it's made. They want to know that the people behind the scenes are being treated right.
And they should. Okay, so we've been talking about all these financial and ethical issues, but there's another big piece of this puzzle we need to address, and that's the SABC. And those TV licenses, or the lack of them, right?
Oh, yeah. The SABC, they've got their own set of problems, and those TV license fees, or rather the lack of people paying them, that's a big part of it.
So the SABC, they're the public broadcaster, right?
Right.
The ones who are supposed to be providing news and entertainment to everyone. And TV licenses are how they get funded, right?
That's the idea, yeah. But there's a big problem. People just aren't paying them.
How bad is it, really? Like, what percentage of people are just skipping out on paying?
Some reports say it's over 80% in some areas. I mean, that's a huge chunk of their revenue just gone. No wonder they're struggling.
80%?
Yeah.
That's insane. But why aren't people paying? Is it just because they don't want to spend the money? Or is there something else going on?
It's complicated. Some people say the SABC's programming just isn't worth the price of the license. Others are annoyed with how the fees are collected, like it's not efficient or transparent.
So there's a trust issue, too.
Exactly. Plus, you've got all these streaming services now, Netflix, Showmax, they're way cheaper, and they offer all this other content. So the SABC, they're kind of stuck. They're losing viewers, they're losing money, and they're facing all this competition. It makes you wonder, can this whole TV license model even survive in today's world?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Lots of people are saying it's outdated, that it's not sustainable. They're calling for a complete overhaul of the whole system.
So what are the options? What else could they do to keep the SABC afloat?
Well, that's what everyone's trying to figure out. Some people say we should just tax every household that has a TV, regardless of whether they actually watch SABC. Others say the government should just give them a direct subsidy, like they do in other countries.
But wouldn't that give the government too much control? Like, what happens to the SABC's independence if they're relying on government money? It's a tough one. You need to make sure they have enough money to operate, but you don't want to compromise their integrity. It's a balancing act. And honestly, it's something a lot of countries are dealing with right now. This whole digital revolution, it's changing the media landscape everywhere.
It really is a global issue, isn't it?
Yeah.
But with all this talk about funding and models and the big picture, it's easy to forget about the real people who are being hurt by all of this.
Absolutely. We can't lose sight of the human cost. We're talking about real lives being impacted.
I mean, you read through these sources, and it's just story after story of people struggling, actors selling their stuff, crew members facing eviction because they haven't been paid, families struggling to put food on the table. These aren't just industry problems. They're real-life problems for real people. It's heartbreaking, honestly. And there was one story in particular that really got to me, the one about Brandon Orette.
Oh, you mean the actor who was in that BET Africa show, Pan for a Pound?
Yeah, that's the one. He went public about it, saying that BT shouldn't have aired the show when they knew the crew hadn't been paid. Called it, and I quote, a poor show of morals. It really makes you think, where do we draw the line? When does entertainment cross over into exploitation?
It's a good question, and it brings to mind the work that organizations like the South African Guild of Actors, SAGA, are doing. They're fighting for these people, advocating for fair treatment, making sure contracts are being followed, even offering legal help to their members.
So they're like a union for actors, but maybe with a lot more on their plate, given everything that's going on.
Yeah, something like that. They're really stepping up, speaking out about these non-payment situations, putting pressure on these production companies and the broadcasters to take responsibility. And they're trying to educate actors about their rights so they don't get taken advantage of.
It sounds like they have a huge role to play in all this. But what about the government? Shouldn't they be doing more to protect these workers? Shouldn't there be some kind of regulations in place to make sure everyone is following the rules?
That's a hot topic for sure. Some people say the Department of Employment and Labor needs to get more involved, enforce stricter labor laws, maybe even start a licensing system for production companies.
So basically more oversight, more accountability.
Exactly. But there are some who are worried that too much government involvement could backfire. They say it might stifle creativity, make it harder for smaller productions to get off the ground. It's tricky finding that balance between protecting workers and allowing the industry to thrive.
It always is, isn't it? It's never a simple solution.
Yeah,
But at least we're having these conversations, acknowledging that there's a problem. That's a start, right?
for sure. And, for all the problems we've uncovered, there's still so much potential in the South African film and TV industry. It's just a matter of harnessing it the right way.
It's like they're at a crossroads. They need to decide what kind of industry they want to be, what values they want to prioritize. It's time for some soul searching, maybe a little bit of a reset.
They have the opportunity to rebuild, to create something better, something more sustainable, more ethical, an industry that takes care of its people while still fostering creativity, an industry that can share South Africa's stories with the world.
And that's a vision worth striving for. So for our listeners out there, I think the takeaway is this. Stay informed, ask questions, and don't settle for anything less than what you deserve. Support productions that treat their workers fairly, fight for policies that support the arts, and hold those in power accountable for their actions.
We all have a role to play. Every voice matters. Every choice we make can make a difference. The future of South African storytelling, it's in our hands.
That's a great way to put it. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the South African film and TV industry. It's been a wild ride, but hopefully it sparked some important conversations. Keep asking those tough questions, keep demanding better, and let's work together to build a brighter future for South African stories on